Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 5. So Chapter 5 in the book starts on page 135, and it talks about beautiful layouts and card view and scroll view. The first thing they start talking about is the units of measure. Now, we've kind of mentioned this a bit, but let's just get started. So I'm going to go ahead and create me a brand new project, and I'm going to call mine Chapter 5. Just makes it easy to keep track of all this stuff. So mine's going to be called Chapter 5. And then wait for it to come up. And eventually we get to the point where, ta-da, it's up and running. Cool. So now I have a Chapter 5 project. Now, I'm going to do just something kind of simple to kind of get going. So I'm going to switch over to the activity layout. And this text view has a hello world on it. And it uses lots of different things. I can go in here and change like the size of something, okay? So if I go down to the design and click on the text view and bring up attributes, come on, and then go to text size. Then text size has some choices here. They start off with 14 SP. Okay, so what are the choices? Well, pay attention because this is kind of important. One of them is pixels. I can go in here and say I want this thing to be, 10 px. Okay, that'll work. But 10 pixels means on a big screen, that's going to be tiny. On a small screen, it's going to be big. And so that's not normally what you would use to scale something, right? Because, right? So the other one is called DP, which is density independent pixels. What that means is given the current size of the designer, I want you to proportionally scale this. So if your screen had half of the resolution, it'll still take up the same amount of space. So that one is very good for sizing things like buttons and those kinds of things, and text views and things like that of that nature. Cool. The next one is SP, which stands for scaled points. Now, there's not that much difference between a DP, a density independent pixel, and SP for scaled points, except for the user has some control over the text size. A lot of people, have visual impairment of some sort, or, maybe you just don't want to put on your glasses, and so you want to hold the thing and be able to read the dang text. Well, there's a way you can go to Android and say, I want all the text on every application to be larger, okay? SP will allow it to do that. SP will allow it to allow the user to scale it over and above what the normal. So DP scales on the size of the screen. SP scales on the size of the screen and allows the users to make it larger or smaller if they wish. And then, of course, there's inches and millimeters, which, quite frankly, nobody uses because that's just kind of dumb. And beside the point, let's say you wanted something. You wanted a 1 inch by 1 inch square to appear on your applications for some reason. It does a relatively poor job of actually doing the math. I don't understand. I mean, to me, the machine can tell you how many pixels wide the screen is, but it can't tell you the dimensions of the screen for some reason. It just doesn't work well. So that doesn't work as well as you might think. So one more time, in review. SP is for fonts. Yes, you could use SP on things that are not fonts, but most people don't. So SP is for fonts because they scale automatically with the size, plus they allow the users to tweak it. DP is for placement. I want to scoot it over 5 pixels. Well, not 5 pixels from my current view, not 5 pixels, period. So scaling things, how big things are, how far, margins and those kinds of things. That's what a DP would be used for. Pixel, I actually use pixel once in a while. I use it, for example, I'm creating a border around an image or border around a button. You know, I want a black border around a button. And so 1 pixel is good. So it doesn't matter if you have a really, really big screen or a small screen. I still want it to be 1 pixel, right? I don't want my line to get fuzzy as it scales out trying to make up a difference. So just 1 pixel is fine. So that's about the only place where I use pixels is in the border attribute, believe it or not. And then inches and millimeters, nobody ever uses that. Okay, so one more time, widget sizing. So if I tell you what, I'm going to blow this one away and start over from scratch. I'm going to do something different than what's in the book, so pay attention. Let me go ahead and close this guy down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start over with a brand new layout. And so what the book has you do is they have you go in and comment this one out and create a new one and all the rest of that junk. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm just going to right click on this thing and say delete. Now when you delete, it's going to say, hey, would you like me to check to see if this delete is going to mess things up? And I'm going to turn that off because quite frankly, I know that deleting activity main is going to mess things up. Okay, so I deleted it. And then I turn right around and I build me a new one. So I go in here, new layout. Now I have to call it the exact same name, otherwise it won't work. Activity underscore main. Okay? If you hadn't remembered what it was, now would be the time. And I'm going to change it from constraint layout to the linear layout, which we've been using. Okay. So now everything's back. I still have a, by the way, if I'm doing some serious design work, which is certainly not the case here, but if I was doing some serious design work, one of the things I would do is I would get rid of the blueprint. I don't ever use the blueprint thing. So I'm just going to go here and say, no, just give me the design only. And maybe I'm going to dismiss this thing so I get a little bit more real estate. And so when I'm going in there, I might want to zoom in some more, you know, and get really close to what it is I'm working on. So for example, I'm going to grab me a button and drop me a button on here. Okay, cool. Now, we've talked about this before, but let's talk about this layout width and layout height thing, okay? So, yes, I could go in there with an attribute and tell it exactly what I want, right? I could go in here, so the layout width, I could say 100 dp, okay? And then there it is. Cool? That'd be one way of doing it. So the idea of the width, typically there's 2 major choices. One of them called wrap content, which means you figure out the size that the button ought to be based upon the text that's inside the button. That's it. And that's a pretty cool starting point, okay? Match parent, which used to be called fill, but now it's called match, whatever, means I'm going to consume all the available space that's available. I mean, for the width, it's going to consume the entire width. What happens if I went to the height and told it that I want the height of this thing to match the parent? What's it going to do? Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to consume all the available space, right? That's pretty crazy, huh? So wrapping the content, it kind of sort of makes sense if you're doing this, that you're going to be messing with one of those things, probably not both. But for example, let's say you wanted something to be perfectly square. Like for example, you're doing like a tic-tac-toe board using the grid, the table layout, okay? You would probably have to measure the width of the thing, measure the height of the device in pixels, figure out whichever one is the smallest because it could be rotated, and then use that for both the width and the height. Okay, so that'd be a rather unique scenario where you actually tell it precisely what the sizes are supposed to be. Okay, so wrap content basically means let the machine just figure it out based upon the content. And of course, if you don't have any content, for example, if I go to the text for let me put this width back to wrap content. Okay, now I'm going to make this guy shorter by just putting a single letter in there. Okay. Well, that didn't make that much difference. Okay, I'll put some more stuff. Button number 1 is great. Okay, so you see how having the thing set to wrap content means the size. Obviously, there's a minimum size in there as well. Okay, so match parent is something that we use a lot when we're doing containers, because I want the container to fill the, right? So it's a very common thing to do when you're using containers so that at least one of the sizes on the container is going to be the match parent guy. Okay, kind of makes sense? Probably not both. Probably not both. Okay, now we talked about padding and margins, but let's go through it again on page 139. They have a cool little guy. And so, one more time. So, the content. In this case, let's just use a button as an example. Okay, so the content is the word inside the button. Okay? The padding is the distance between the text and the outside edge of the button. And the border, which we don't have any, but we could turn one on, is, the border around it and then the margins on the outside of that. So could you tell by just looking at our example what the margin and padding and all that stuff is? So I'll tell you what, let's just go down here and see if we can find, by the way, I'm showing you some cool tricks now. Remember, I want to find the border, okay, but I don't know exactly what it's called. So if I click on this and just type, border, like, what I don't really know what this thing is called. Is it called layout border? What's this that guy actually called? So it's not actually called border. It's called stroke. So I tell it the stroke color and the stroke width. So here's where I would say 1px, right? And then for the color, let's just pick, I'm going to go to resources and pick black just for the heck of it. Okay. Now, let's just see what this thing's supposed to look like. I mean, if I zoom in, I should be actually be able to see the border. Okay, so you see my little border around there? The problem now is it looks like I have an issue with the padding. Or is it margin? Which is it? Ooh, okay. All right, so using the little search engine is pretty cool, particularly if you don't know what it's called. Sometimes you just have to give up and go, look, I'm going to have to go look it up. I can't figure out what the heck this thing is. All right, so you guys understand how this thing works? Good. All right, one more time. The margin is on the outside. So the margin is this space that is between the top and the beginning of the button. That's the margin. The padding is in between button is great and the top of the button. Cool? All right. Okay. Whew. Now let's talk about weights one more time. So we did on page 140, they start talking about weights. Now, weights is a complicated scenario because you can get yourself really, really confused in a hurry. I'm going to go ahead and delete this button and start over. Okay, so I'm going to do the exact same thing we did before, kinda. I'm going to put a text view. First of all, I'm going to create me a layout. This one's going to be a horizontal layout. Okay. And then I'm going to put a text view on here. Doink. And then I'm going to put an edit text, okay, which is this guy. He doesn't actually say edit text. He says plain text, okay? That kind of makes sense. Oops, I didn't mean a linear guy. Hey, is there a cool way you can click on this and say, look, I made a mistake. I didn't mean linear. I really meant vertical. I said it wrong, but you got my point. Is there a way you can click on there and say, no, I didn't mean vertical, I really meant horizontal? Okay. So we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so we'll figure that out in just a second.